We wanted to, first of all, celebrate our Black players, Black staff, Black history, also be a part of the conversation to challenge and change. So that's why we wanted to do this, but the key is celebrating everything that's Brentford has done and is doing.
Christian and Josh, you know, players get asked a lot of things and they don't necessarily always want to do the commitments that happen off the pitch. Why, Christian, did you want to be part of this evening?
Yeah, first of all, when Lorna approached me about this topic, I would always say yes when it has something to do with talking about diversity and kicking out racism. So the topic is very touchy, and you have to, like, I was speaking to Lorna this morning and to Josh as well, feeling a little nervous because you don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to say something that might come out a bit wrong. But like Lorna said, I think it's very important that we take a stand and we use our voice, especially us players.
Josh, would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. You know, obviously being like myself, yeah, I'm happy that we're here, and you know, as Lorna said, to first and foremost celebrate that what we're doing at Brentford and how we're doing things, and also talk about what we can do even better for the community.
Josh, I'm going to ask you to speak with twice the volume or just get nearer your phone the next time I come to you. Troy, as someone who speaks about this a lot, how pleased are you that a football club has decided to, you know, do this on a Thursday evening?
Listen, having worked with the football club on a number of occasions, I know this is not something that they're just doing because of it's this period of the month, you know. The club has been very proactive in everything that it does around diversity, in terms of putting on these opportunities to listen to important people, relevant people, people who have lived experiences. And hopefully it goes wider than just the piece that the football club want it to, you know. Internally is great, but already I know that there's people on this webinar that are not connected to Brentford that are keen to listen and learn. And I think any football club that can do that and also have the players on board as well, which is great. I know Christian said that he, you know, is a little bit nervous, but there's nothing to be nervous about. It's about your experiences, it's about your understanding, and it's about that collective contribution that everyone can make towards this topic and beyond, you know. So really important and really powerful, you know, hopefully what's going to happen tonight.
Shaun, you're a Chelsea fan. What are you doing here?
Well, my connection with Brentford stems via Bradley Walsh, who obviously was on Brentford's books one time, and I played in a friendly about 5-6 years ago, and I struck up a very good relationship with Mike Sullivan. And ever since then, I've you know, come down to Brentford at least 2 to 3 times a year to actually support them. Yes, I'm a diehard Chelsea, but Brentford are my local side, and they are a local club who are doing really, really well. Not only in terms of building a new stadium, they were within touching distance of being promoted to the Premier League. But what really impresses me about Birmingham, about Brentford, and about tonight's discussion is the fact that they are celebrating Black achievement, diversity within the community at large, and I want to challenge the stereotypes that Black people cannot make a positive contribution to our society at large. And it's a privilege and an honour for me to actually be part of this conversation.
And Monique, what do we want to achieve tonight? How will we know if this has been worthwhile?
For me, it's about the actions that we take away from tonight. I think it's really easy to do a webinar, you know, to put out a statement in the press, to be a voice, to be a reputational spokesman about something, but then go away and do nothing. And we want to be the most inclusive football club in the UK, which is a big ask. It's a big vision. We really believe we can get there, and we won't do that until we weed out what the things are we really need to change, to look at our attitudes and our behaviours. and make a real difference, an impactful difference. And I say, if you really want to make a difference, you have to measure what you're doing. So you have to look at actions over a period of time, and you have to say, what did we say we were going to do, and how did we actually do that, and how successful were we in making that come about? So for me, the most powerful outcome for tonight will be to take away actions that we can truly follow up and then make a real difference to how we're seen, how we include people, how we make people from all backgrounds feel welcome in what we do.
We do want to celebrate the contribution of black players, and at Brentford, you know, there is a rich history there. And quite interesting, until recently, and I was learning about this yesterday, the club thought that Chris Kamara was the first ever black player for Brentford, making his debut on the 31st of October in 1981 in a gripping goalless draw with Burnley at Griffin Park. Much earlier than that, though, 1905, Fred Corbett, one of the first black players to ever play in the Football League, joined Brentford. He made 93 appearances, scoring 37 goals before he went on to play for Bristol Rovers. So Chris Kamara doesn't have the record. He is, we think, the first black player to play for Brentford who has also hosted Ninja Warriors, unless, of course, Fred Corbett did one of the early pilots of Ninja Warriors in the early 1910s. Big gap between Corbett and Kamara, but since then, you will all know better than I do. Loads of famous black players. Marcus Bean, who's a great guy, isn't he? Carly Osborne. Hall of Famers, Lloyd Owusu, club ambassador Marcus Gayle. Marcus, are you in the Hall of Fame?
I was inducted in 2015, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, good. It's good to know that, only because if you weren't, this would have been an awkward moment. How important do you feel it is to be part of this today?
I think it's extremely important to be involved in any sort of discussion around this topic, and it's a good occasion for people to maybe pick up pointers that they may not have learnt before or heard before, but to also hear and share the celebration of what black players have done at the club over many years. And the future is bright as well. We've got a good nucleus of different backgrounds at the club at the moment, and I think that's going to really help the club make a real stamp in the game against all sort of discrimination that we're trying to fight. And you know, the club's in a very good position to learn and educate a lot of people.
Sure, yeah. In the first team squads, black players make up about a third of it. 13 different nationalities, more players from Nordic countries than from Britain. When Matthew Benham took over, he wanted to make the club as diverse as possible, as you said, Monique, to make it the most inclusive club in the country. Before we get to sort of boardroom level, can we start on the pitch with Christian and Josh? And I guess the one place, Christian, where football is really diverse is on the pitch. Across your career in Germany, Denmark, and here, is it something that you have actually thought about as a member of a squad?
I have never really thought about it. I've never seen players and thought about their colors of skin. But I've of course always known what has been going on and what some people, some of my friends have both witnessed and experienced in their life, and that obviously makes me very sad. But I think in general, football is a great way to get out of all of that, and I think it's a great way to mix all different cultures and experiences, and don't have to think about too much if you're black or white.
Sure. And I guess, Josh, you know, when you're playing football and when you're training, and because like players come from all different backgrounds, and it's not, you're judged purely on your ability, it isn't necessarily something that players are thinking about most of the time.
Yeah, I was thinking that as you asked the question, that it's not, I don't think about it either. You just think, I don't think Brentford do either. It's just, can the player do what they're wanting them to do? You know, you don't think, oh yeah, let's sign him because he's black, or let's sign him because he's white. No, you sign him because he's a good midfielder, he's a good striker, he scores goals. You know what I mean? He's a good defender. So I think, me personally, I've never really thought of it like that. And yeah, I think Brentford, obviously we've got a real diverse group, and it helps.
Christian, did you think about it at all? I mean, Marcus, sorry, did you think about it at all when you were playing?
I came in that, you know, during the 80s, mid to late 80s. The place was a different landscape. in terms of society. There was a different culture around the place, and I was probably one of the novelties as being a black player, but there was certain barriers to try and overcome and break through banter, change room language, and the certain stereotypes. But once you get past those, and it kind of hardened me as well, in a safe way, is that don't take that on too much. But I think people just respect what you can do in the team first and foremost. And fortunately enough, I had the opportunity at the club to show what I could do, and I moved on from there as well. So there was that achievement to look at with players that were black, that were, good enough to play in the team, no doubt, and there was never a problem.
Christian, can we talk about taking the knee and whether you as a squad talked about what it meant, or just thought everyone else is doing, we better do it?
I think looking back at it, it might have been something we should have talked more about. Maybe really digging deep into where does this come from and why is all of this happening right now. I think also the club has a big responsibility to let the players know. We might even should have had a meeting to talk about it before doing it. So yeah, my opinion on it is quite clear. I mean, I'm against, like I said before, all kinds of racism. So I don't even care if it says Black Lives Matter. It's not what it says. It's not what it comes from. It's about being united about something, and to show as a group that we are against something.
And Josh, like when you first did it, how did it feel to do that?
For me, it was kind of overwhelming. Obviously, it's not an ideal situation, of course, what happened, and we don't want to be in this situation, but it was kind of like, wow, like people are really starting to realize and recognize that, that lives do matter, and like it's come on one of the biggest scales, like everyone watches football, so you're seeing the Premier League do it, we do it, even if our game's not even on TV, we still do it. So it's obviously, it sends a big message to, I guess what we're trying to do is educate people, especially the young people who watch football. So for me, obviously, it's a great thing, and yes, I think it was good.
Shaun, as a black football fan, what did it mean to you to see players taking the knee?
A great sense of pride. Remember, Colin Kaepernick took the knee against a fierce backlash, and it cost him his career. I think everybody taking the knee in sport, particularly football, paid him the ultimate compliment to basically say, look, it is right to stand up for one's rights because of your colour. Yes, it is right to make a stand if we're being totally being disrespected by virtue of the colour of our skin. So for me, it was a great sense of pride to see footballers embrace that. But we need to actually move the conversation on now to what are the FA going to do in terms of having greater diversity to make sure that footballers are respected by virtue of the colour of their skin, that footballers do have a pathway in relation to management, and obviously in relation to the boardroom, and obviously in relation to the decision making. And I'm sure that Troy is going to be with me on that particular path, because I think it's very, very important that we've got to now move the conversation on to more influential ways.
Troy?
Yeah, without doubt. First of all, endorse what Shaun has said there. I just wanted to add value to the knee. It's the most powerfulest thing I've ever seen in football, bar nothing. It's the most powerfulest thing. It's, first and foremost, it was around solidarity for what was happening out in America, in the US, and showing that sport had a conscience and was appreciating our, US partners and what they've done. But it also sent a message back into the game, a message that was, we kneel together, but what are you going to do? Like Shaun has said, and when, certain views were coming out and people were now starting to say, well, why are they still taking the knee? My view was, well, what's changed? what has changed since the end of May, when, you know, George Floyd's life was taken away, horrendously taken away? What's changed in the 40 plus years that I've been involved in this industry, and always have to talk about the actions of others against people of a different color skin? You know, why is it that racism remains a common theme and is the highest point of reports that come into us as an organization? Why? So, you know, the power of the player has also come out more in this, and I hold respect to our players in the English leagues, the way they have contributed now with more voice and power than probably ever before. And it's not to disrespect those that went before, because they laid the paths for these players. But ultimately, the question is, you know, when are we start going to see more influential black figures, male, female, at the highest level of the game, making the decisions, challenging the very aspect of what happens globally in our sport? And so that we can, you know, players like the two we have on here, Josh and Christian, can believe that there's a future for them when they also finish the game. And I'm not trying to end their careers early doors, but without doubt, we'd want to know that there is an opportunity for players to develop in this industry and become important figures in this industry as well.
You know, and Lorna, you know, you have become an important figure at a football club, and I imagine, you know, there weren't that many black women for you to look up to get into the position that you've got.
No, they weren't. And I was actually trying to have a look around today and trying to find somebody that was there before me. And sadly, I couldn't find anyone, but I'm not saying they didn't exist. I just didn't see them. So that sentence that, you know, Troy has helped me with, of seeing it to be it. What I found in my career was there was a lot of, although I didn't need to see it to be it, I just believed in myself to want to do it. I think that those in senior positions needed to see it to believe it. So they needed to see people, you know, black people in positions, senior positions in football clubs and at the leagues that I've worked in and at the FA, and they didn't exist when you know, 25 years ago when I started working in the industry. So it was the likes of me and Troy and those that I've known for some time that, you know, we had to prove ourselves that, you know, we can do these jobs, but they just didn't see it. So we had to create those pathways and show that it is possible and we are all capable.
How difficult is it? I mean, because there is this image, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's just stuffy old white boots.
Yeah, it was that, you know, I do think that there were colleagues of mine that I've worked with that had a easier journey than I did because I'm black and they weren't. So, you know, that's a given. But then I also had a lot of people that I had worked with within the industry that I could reach out to, and, you know, mentors that I had that weren't necessarily black people. They were just people who I could communicate with. They were white people, but anti-racist. So, you know, people I could talk to and, you know, learn from. And that's what I needed to do to get to the position I wanted to be in.
I'm kind of interested to know if people think we're in a better position now than we were, as Marcus was talking about being in the 80s. George has asked the question saying, Marcus, you mentioned how it was to be a black player in the 80s. Did perceptions and attitudes change throughout your career from the start to the end of it? Did you feel it changing or not?
I don't think the perceptions have changed that much. I just think the volume of black players have definitely changed the game, where we're not far and few between as we once were, but there's a heavy volume of black players. As you said, there's what, 30% that play the game at top flight, and that's a positive as well. But I still think that the perceptions still linger on, with, you know, even just simple terms of commentary. Our black players are strong and very quick, and all. We're never put in the category of intelligence. There's never like a black number 10, so to speak, or just a number 10 that happens to be black. And these are the sort of perceptions that we're still trying to break through and fight, because we're just as good as anybody else, as we know. But the perceptions, the game has changed in some ways, but there's still some distance to go in certain aspects for sure.
Troy, I've heard you say before that, you know, you're tired of talking about these things. Do you think, I sort of wonder with social media is that, you know, social media has lots of good things. It connects people, but it also connects racists, right? They all can see each other sort of saying terrible things. And I don't know if we're getting anywhere. You know, I sort of grew, as I was growing up, I'd sort of feel, yeah, there is progress. And I, you know, everyone is constantly learning as they get older. But right now, do you see it in a positive light? You know, do you see us making breakthroughs, or do you feel sort of beaten down by it?
You was going to ask that question. Listen, from a fan's perspective, we don't see bananas on our football pitches. No, well, we did in 2018, but we very rarely see bananas on our pitches anymore. We rarely hear monkey chant. We don't hear monkey chanting in England. We do on foreign soil. So yeah, things have improved since that very day. But Marcus made a very good point there about the intelligence of black players. You know, we're deemed to be the entertainers. We're deemed to be the ones that are there for the product on the pitch, and that we can be celebrated in that way. But because of the way that we're spoken about and the way that we are not deemed as intelligent as our white counterparts, that affects the transition out of the game. Because intelligence, or to be deemed intelligent, is a very important thing. I still get frustrated on a daily basis. So if you wanted this webinar to be upbeat, I'm sorry, can I bring it downbeat for a minute? I absolutely get frustrated on a daily basis about the industry. And the industry is making strides, small steps, but we're in 2020, Max. And we're in 2020 when this industry can actually lead other industries to be so proactive and positive that these discussions are not needed anymore. And until we get to a point where I'm not being called on a regular basis and colleagues around are being questioned about representation, then how do we judge how far we have come? So on the playing side of it, yes, we're better represented. In the managerial circles, it's embarrassing. In the coaching circles, it's embarrassing. 5 managers out of 92. That stat has been fluctuate between 6, 7 down to 2, 1 for how long? So actually, there's so many elements of the industry, the boardroom. You know, how many black figures do we see in the boardroom? So there's many a challenge still to have, and there's many a frustration still to have. But I'm going to highlight the positive again, and that's the power of the influencers, the player voice, the way that they are speaking up more, and the way that they are presenting themselves, so that, you know, the lazy stereotypes that have existed for far too long are being batted away.
Shaun?
Well, to endorse what Lorna and Troy have said, I think the only way we are going to actually really see the nirvana of real change, which we want to see, is if the establishment, which is predominantly white males who actually control football in essence, whether or not they'll be prepared to have an organisation which reflects the diversity of the community in which we live. And I'm wondering whether or not they'll be prepared to actually even give up a semblance of power in order to actually have that diversity. And until they recognise the need to have that diversity, which is going to bring in fresh ideas, fresh thinking, and which will help the organisation grow, I'm concerned, just like Troy is, as to whether or not they will be prepared to actually give up a semblance of power, because they may be frightened of losing power and control altogether. And I think that's going to be the problem.
Shaun, from outside the industry, I mean, look, football doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? And I don't know if it matters if it's ahead or behind, but like from your experience in, you know, the law or in entertainment, where do you think football stands in it?
Well, I mean, when we take law, I mean, as I say, I was one of the first black barristers to be establish a practice some 30 years ago, and it was extremely difficult then. We are seeing a greater diversity in terms of more lawyers from an ethnic background, greater female representation from an ethnic background, and you are seeing the appointment of QCs from an ethnic background. But when we get to the next level, the judiciary, the higher appointees, you are seeing that barrier. And until we break that concrete ceiling, we're not going to get real change in terms of seeing the need to have a diverse legal profession, a diverse football industry, a diverse entertainment industry, which reflects people who actually, use those services. And the one thing which is common to all three is that the fact that the powers that be who are in control are from a particular social background, are from a particular gender, and as I say, who wants to actually give up power? Because once you loosen that grip of control, you're going to open the floodgates, and I think that's the fear they always have.
I think
Interesting you talk about. Carry on. Yeah.
No, I was just saying about Shaun was saying about power and control and people at the very top. One of the things that I found was that although I've been in the industry quite some time, a lot of the opportunities that were offered to me were around diversity. And I didn't want to focus on diversity. I just wanted to focus on the area of my job that I was in at the time. So at the moment, it's football operations. So I want to be involved in football operations. I don't necessarily want to be involved in the inclusion projects, the diversity, the community projects. And I think that's something that those, at the FA need to recognise, that I'm not, those of us of colour, the Black people, we're not trying to just bring all the Black people along with us to do things. And I'm not out here searching for them. We just want an equal share of the pie, of in every position.
Of course. Josh, do you know what you want to do after football? As I say, I'm not retiring you early either, but do you think about going into coaching and management, or do you look and think it looks much more difficult for me because of the colour of my skin?
I haven't really thought about it, but I have been told I'll make a good coach. So I think maybe I could go into coaching. I'm not too sure. But yeah, like just alluding to what everyone's saying, obviously, it's, as you said, like people may hesitate to want to do that because you don't see so many Black coaches out there, and you know what I mean. Like I was watching Sky Sports the other day, and I think it was Hasselbank was on there, and he was talking about it. And the facts and the stats are there for everyone to see. So it's not like we're making this up or we're plucking it from the sky. People can see that Hasselbank played at a top level, but why is it for him so much harder to be able to get even like a championship team? He was a top striker in them days. So it's there for everyone to see. But no, I'm not too sure what I'm gonna do yet after my career. But yeah, we'll see.
Christian, would Josh make a good coach?
Yeah, I'm sure he would. Talking about intelligence, I think Josh would probably be one of the first one I would point out. So yeah, I'm sure you'd make a great manager one day.
Shaun.
And that's really sad for Josh to basically say, I don't know whether or not I really want to be a coach. And that's what happens. You're going to get a lost generation of talented Black and ethnic coaches who have got a lot to offer to the game. But when they look around for role models, to basically say, look, that's a person I want to emulate, they're sort of despondent in relation to the fact, well, is it really worth it? When I look back, it took, the Premiership, the best part of nearly 20 years to appoint its first Black manager, Paul Ince. Paul Ince was a wonderfully gifted, decorated footballer. He captained his country. Yet, when he was given the post, he lasted no longer than 6 months. Another classic example is what I think was the terrible treatment suffered at the hands of Chris Hughton. Chris Hughton is a wonderfully gifted coach. He's taken 2 teams up to the Premiership, yet because of the fact that they don't, the type of football he likes to play, all of a sudden it becomes unfashionable, and they use that as an excuse to get rid of him. And I wondered, was that the real reason? And that can be demoralising for young players like Josh, who want to actually have a future and see whether or not it's really worth it. And we can't afford to lose that type of talent.
I was saying, off the pitch, the mentality can be the same, that sometimes, for instance, if a manager, but a black manager, Paul Ince, didn't do so well, you know, a club may not run the risk of employing another black manager like myself off the field if I'm one of the first black people to work at a club or at a league, and if for any reason I didn't do very well, then it reflects on the next black person coming in, where it wouldn't do with white people or any as the industry stands. So that's the challenge, that we have to sometimes work a little bit harder and make sure that we're doing things that are representing those around us, where we shouldn't really be still having to do that.
A question, Monique, for you from Jim, and probably the key question of the whole thing, which is, what can fans do to help make the difference that you referred to about making Brentford the most inclusive club? What can the supporters do?
I think fans have a massive role in being allies. And I think that there's a few things they can do, both positive and to call out negatives. I think the first one is, you know, when you are in a stadium, who the voices are around you that are negative. You know who they are. You know the same group. And I think Brentford have often, like other clubs, have been accused of maybe not tackling certain fans who may be a bit difficult, and we know those ones and who they are. But honestly, we have to see something concrete happening before we can tackle it. We can't just go in and accuse an individual. We have to see evidence, and it has to be true, clear evidence, unrefutable evidence, before we actually do something about it, as was a situation that happened that was high profile a few weeks, where we did ban somebody and we've given them education as well. Now, I think what fans have a great responsibility to do, and there are those, by the way, that do it already, when they see behaviour they don't like, they call it out straight away. They hold no prisoners, they report it to us, they report it to Kick It Out, and more if they see it to police. So I think that's one thing that they can do, and to keep on doing that, not be frightened about it. But the second thing is to gather groups of fans together and to try to bring in people they know in their social circles, or people that maybe live in their community, to come and enjoy a good, inclusive welcome, because it's only a small people that aren't inclusive. For the most part, I think a lot of clubs are very, very inclusive, but you get a small group of fans that give a club a bad name. So I think you've got to be allies. You've got to find people outside and go, come along, enjoy the welcome that we offer. If you see something you don't like, call it out, you know, celebrate the players we've got, celebrate the diversity we've got. And that's actually how fans can do it. I think fan groups are really powerful. And I think when people form fan groups, I think they're really powerful for gathering momentum. There's an argument for and against them. So, you know, for instance, there's a very good friend of the club who is very involved in a group called the Punjabi Rams. He may even be on this webinar tonight. You'd say, why would you gather a group of Indian people together, or Punjabi people together, or black people together? That goes against the grain, because what you're doing is you're all being together, you know, separately from us. But actually, I don't think it is that. I think what you have to do is give people the opportunity to feel safe in numbers before you can make a difference. And once they feel safe in numbers, they can be included in the whole mindset that a club has to offer. So I would love to see more fan groups of diverse backgrounds come into our club, for instance, but in clubs in general, so that once they do feel safe in numbers, they can be integrated in a really holistic, welcoming way. So I think fans do have a responsibility to help with this.
Troy, can I ask about calling it out? I mean, Monique mentioned it there, and I've heard, you know, I've used that phrase on the radio. I've heard you say it. It's much easier to say that's what people should do on a webinar when we're all supportive of it. When you're actually in that moment, it's not as easy, is it? And it takes bravery to do it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's. Does that make sense? Am I articulating that correctly? You think?
Lost the first bit, Max. I kind of get what you're saying, but the first how you opened, I didn't hear that properly. Was it about calling things out?
Just asking about. It's about calling things out and about how important it is to calling it out, to call stuff out, but an awareness that some people feel reluctant to do it because people like to avoid confrontation, don't they?
I would like to say it should be the easiest thing to do, but I know from experience it's not. You know, ultimately you're taking on the industry. You could be taking on a fan base. You could be taking on whoever it is that doesn't want to hear that topic of conversation again. You know, every time I speak up and speak out about incidents, I've got to be honest, there's a little bit about me wondering, is that going to be the last time I'm going to be allowed to say what I say in the way that I say it, you know, because it's not easy for the lone black voice or the lone few black voices to challenge an industry that has never really truly listened to the black voice in the past. You know, you think of the likes of Lorna and the position that she has in football, and you wonder why she is one of the only, maybe the only person of color in that position. Why are others not being afforded the opportunity? We have a talent pipeline as good as anybody else, and it then becomes the fact that people feel that the job is not for them. They don't feel that they'll be given the right opportunities. You can align that with the coaching conversation that was just a minute ago. We have a talent pipeline that's as good as any. We have players coming out of the game, taking their coaching badges and wanting to give back to the game. But every time they do that and they're deemed not as good as their white counterparts, then they get disillusioned. And disillusionment is something that people experience in this game on more than enough occasions. You know, Shaun spoke about lost generation. We're just about to lose another generation of talented coaches. If we lose another generation underneath that, we're going to go back to square one. So these opportunities that are there, remember there's 92 clubs in this pyramid. I don't know how many coaching roles, managerial roles, and whatever else that may be at the highest level of the game, but it's a lot. And for us to only be seeing 5 managers and a handful of coaches, you know, Danny Rose, Tottenham Hotspur, you know, England international, said when he's finished the game, he's done. I'm done. I don't see that there's an opportunity for me, and I've had enough experiences to say that I don't want to do it no more. I don't want to go into the coaching levels. And people have questioned him, but that's the lad's experience. Why are you gonna talk about his experience and deny the fact that he feels that there will not be opportunity for him? And if Danny's saying that in his position, and he's one that I do look up to because he speaks out at every opportunity, by the way, and then is labelled with the aggressive, the chip on the shoulder, oh, here he goes again. That's what we have to deal with on a regular occurrence when we do speak out about these issues. And again, you know, you're going to say you're repeating yourself, Troy, but that's what I don't see in our young players coming through now, in the players that have taken these stances and are prepared to talk up, whatever the circumstance may be and whatever the consequence may be, because they believe in what they're saying. And it's our heroes of the past who have allowed them to do that, have allowed them to have that platform now.
Yeah, and I was saying just on the back of that, and I'd like to think that Christian and Josh and Monique would agree with me when I say I think at Brentford and the things that we're trying to do, and by giving opportunities to people from different backgrounds, it allows people to see that there is an opportunity at Brentford for you to do what it is you want to do. So, you know, obviously I'm talking off the pitch, and that's where I'm coming from. And I don't know if anyone there would agree that it's the opportunity is there. You can see it, and I've known Troy for some time, and it's only recently that I've put myself forward to show my face that, you know, there are opportunities for you to apply for. You can come and be a part of the football industry. So, you know, as much as I agree with most of what Troy just said, that, you know, people do not see it, it is important that we want people to see that you can have the opportunity at Brentford.
I'm Monique. Yes, your hand is up.
I wholeheartedly agree with what Lorna said. So there's a couple of things. I think that what Troy's talking about is blasting open the networks that exist of white males within the industry. And why people aren't getting the opportunities is if we go to our little address book and we find who we've already known, we're always going to get what we've always got. And therefore nothing is going to change. So it's not that there isn't the talent out there, it's just that you're blind to that talent because you're only going for what you know within your circle. So if you don't blast open that concentric circle and look outside and spread your net far further, wider, deeper, of course you're not going to find any other talent out there because you're not looking for it in the first place. So there's an intrinsic bias. So you have to sort of start with acknowledging that there is bias. And once you've acknowledged there's bias, at least you can move further. The trouble is a lot of our biases are unconscious. And by the very fact they're unconscious, we may say we don't have them, but my little line is, if you're breathing, you've got bias. So just get someone to challenge you on it because it's there, and that's what's stopping blowing open those networks. In terms of clubs, not just Brentford, but in terms of clubs, there's work that has to be done, because I think the same network that exists on the pitch with managers and with coaches also exists off the pitch. The pipeline of people that are already in football who don't come from a diverse background is the people that come from it's very, very small. There are very, very few people that you think that you can go to, but that's because most of us as clubs, we don't spread our net far and wide enough in terms of our recruitment processes and procedures to try and find people that come from other places, giving people just a shot at something that's there, taking a risk. You know, as a club, we like to take calculated risks. We've done that with our data science. We've proved that on the pitch, we take these risks and we challenge our bias all of the time on the pitch. And now what we're trying to do is challenge it off the pitch so that we can challenge our own assumptions. In the first place, it starts as recruitment. If we don't start it at recruitment, we're never gonna change this. So that's where, you know, where I'm coming from. It makes me angry, not angry with what Lorna said or Troy said. It makes me angry that people don't acknowledge there is a bias there and there are networks there, because if they don't change, nothing will change.
I completely agree with you. Troy's made the point that whenever I start speaking, there's a horrible noise. So like, I don't know if Troy's just talking about my voice in general, but I'll try speaking, you know, as little as possible. It's really interesting you say that, because Troy called me out basically on, you know, Guardian Football Weekly, which is, you know, the podcast that I host, and we've done shows, Troy, about we did it about the racism in Bulgaria when England went over there. We did one after George Floyd, and you and Jordan Jarrett Bryan said, look, you know, it is about action, right? And it was totally that you know, we had amazing panelists, and you know, some of them it was slightly diverse, and there were a few women, but because we have so many brilliant ones that just were already there, we just kept going back and back and back. And it took basically Troy and Jordan to tell me off, probably, to go, okay, we do really need to look at this, and we do need to just start getting different voices on, and not just to talk about diversity. Don't just get, you know, a woman to talk about women in football. Don't just get a black person about black people in football. Just get them to talk about whether VAR is rubbish or not, you know, and we've done that. So I think
is
totally
that why
right.
I've never been
Troy,
back
your hand
on,
is up. I hope.
Yeah, is that why I've never been back on? Because I called you out.
Well, the point was, Troy, you get good people. That's what we said. You know, it's not, you know, it wasn't just an open. I wanted, Shaun, to ask you about actually what you said about unconscious bias, because lots of people sort of say, you know, there's a ceiling, right, and then everyone above that is a sort of middle-aged white man, and how, if people don't realise that they have an unconscious bias, is that good enough anymore, or has enough been said, and those people in senior positions should be knowledgeable enough to realise that they may have an unconscious bias and to test themselves?
Who was the question to?
Shaun.
Listen, every human being has an unconscious bias. You know, it's part of our DNA, it's part of our makeup. The question is whether or not the powers that be want to actually challenge themselves. And until they actually look within themselves and wanted to challenge themselves, that's when the difficulties in terms of recruitment, appointment will buffer against that concrete ceiling. And going back to the point I made, even if they are in tune with their unconscious bias, do they really want to open up the can of worms of wanting to actually share power and to create that diversity we truly need to have a representative football association boardroom, and the like.
Question from Brian, which says Marcus Rashford has done a great job in bringing child poverty to public attention. Will his heartfelt and articulate actions encourage other black players to speak their mind and be a force for good within football, or footballers actually? Josh, I'll come to you. I don't know what you've made, and Marcus Rashford is he's not even 23, and you know what he's done has been quite extraordinary. I don't know, Josh, if you're on mute at the moment, just in case you want to unmute yourself before you answer the question. But I wonder if you've seen what Marcus Rashford has made you feel like, you know, you could use your position as a footballer for good, or make you feel more confident to speak your mind.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because especially free school meals, like that's something that I needed. So it's crazy and amazing to see what he's done, obviously, for I would say the whole of UK. And yeah, like he's obviously got like a big following and he believes in it a lot. And yeah, I guess because I just see Reece James as well just donated like money, and he started a GoFundMe page for free school meals, I think in and around his area. So it's giving a lot of people like hope to see how powerful he is and see what he's doing. You know, he's challenging like a few of the highest people in the government. So to see that, it's obviously putting more people forward. So I think what he's doing is amazing.
Shaun?
I always say with fame comes responsibility. And people like Marcus Rashford are using their fame and responsibility in a positive way to actually challenge the establishment where they see things which should be challenged. A lot of people forget the good work that Raheem Sterling has done in using his platform. Remember, he was vilified 3 years ago, and when he pointed out the fact that, you know, I'm being vilified in comparison to, say, another white counterpart, why is that unfairness happening? And people began to sort of wake up to that fact. And what he then used his platform to basically speak out in relation to you know, the problems and injustices that black players are facing. And I think it's wonderful that you know, young players like Josh, like Christian, and players who are in the public eye, who are seen as role models, should use their platform for the force of good. And that's what will hold people to account.
Marcus?
Yeah, I was just going to add to both Josh and Shaun as well. There's a massive difference as well with why players can speak up more now. We've touched on it a little bit. Social media platforms. Players now have power within their hands. When I was coming through at age 18, if there was any incident or anything, you was left alone to deal with it on your own. There was no one really to report this to at the club. There was no support systems in place at that time. But the current player now has these people in place, the organisations in place to support and guide you. But ultimately, the power that they have within their hands with their device, they don't need the media to get their story out anymore. And that's a massive difference. When you just go back further in time and you've got people like Clyde Best, imagine what they had to go through with no sort of support from the papers, no one at the club. Yes, you probably had your teammates to back you up because you was that good. But say if he wasn't that good, would you still get the same support? But today the players have that power now. They have that opportunity to use it. And as Shaun said, in a responsible way.
Troy?
Yeah, just on the players and their contributions to football beyond just playing the game and being that entertainer. You know, everyone's right. You know, the players now have stood up. You know, listen, this is not a new thing. When players contribute wages, when they contribute donations, you'll see a lot of the players that come from the African countries who are always sending money back home to make sure that, you know, they're building towns, they're building cities back home. We have players who, you know, have continued to contribute to you know, well-being courses, etc., and they're never going to get publicized because people don't want the good, you know, the media don't want the good news stories. They want the stories where they can be very, very critical. You know, the Players Together initiative put together obviously by the captains and their teammates to donate their finances to the NHS, you know, to make sure that their money was going right to the root cause and not being infiltrated elsewhere. This is all about how the players have taken ownership of their own journeys now and taken ownership of how they contribute and the ways that they want to contribute as well. And for me, this is why this year, although it's been a horrible year in so many different ways and so many different circumstances, the growth of the player and how they are not prepared to accept anymore to be the quiet part of the journey, and how they do want to promote what they're doing and how they do want to make sure that they are looking after people away from football as well, has been unbelievable. And yes, Marcus's story is out there. Yes, everyone knows the challenges Raheem has had. You know, Josh has picked up on Reese's story today, but I tell you now, there's another 100,000 of those stories from players, but they will do them in their own way. Some don't want the publicity. You know, Mesut Ozil has contributed in a way that people will never actually recognise, because all they want to do is know the story of how much his earnings are and the fact that he's not in Arsenal's 25 anymore. But you know, this is a period of time when the players have stood up and have taken all the hits and still come out as probably the most important human beings in this football industry.
Christian, do you feel you have a power, you know, with being in your position, and do you like having that? Or I mean, because I imagine some players just want to play football and don't have necessarily want to think about anything else.
I know that we have the responsibility, and I think it's something that should be encouraged in any way, that they should speak up for not only themselves but for people around them. I think I'm one of them that Troy mentioned doesn't want the publicity, like you said. One of them that doesn't really want all the fuss, more just focusing on playing football. But I know that with the fame and comes the responsibility, but I think it's definitely also up to the individual to do how much he feels confident about. So you don't put yourself in positions where you maybe don't feel either educated enough or just confident enough to be in that position.
It is difficult to it's easy to focus on negative stuff. It's important to have those conversations, right? And that's a key part of all of this. Is there space for hope, right? Can we be hopeful? Are there things we're seeing in, during Black History Month, during what's happened over the last, year, 2, 3, 10, 20? Do we have hope? I see your head's in your hands, Troy, but can you give us any hope?
My head's not in my hands. Honestly, it's not. It was more the fact that I to be honest with you, I'm not a believer in Black History Month, or haven't been. It's an opportunity for far too many to create this little space that look at what we're doing in October and kind of shut the door when October the 31st comes. And then they go back to their I've been in the education industry to see it. I've obviously been in football to see it. I've seen enough negativity after the 31st to tell me that what you were doing were actually playing lip service to the public. But here comes the positive part of it, Max, because you asked for positivity. That's right. Yeah. I think I knew this month was going to be the most powerful that we've had. And the reason being, because after, everything that's happened around Black Lives Matter, our people tried to dilute the cause of Black Lives Matter, by the way. The way that sport has taken Black Lives Matter on, and the way that sport has powered itself to acknowledge the influence and the power of the Black sports figures that we have right across the globe, by the way. You've only got to see, Lewis Hamilton and what he's doing in F1, Asoma Nasaka and what she has done. Naomi Nasaka and what she has done, in her industry. I could go on and go on and go on. To note that, that influence is now becoming stronger. And the reason I think this is one of the most powerful that I've had, Black History Month, by the way, started back in, if I'm right, 1987. So it's not a new thing, is the fact that I am seeing more uncomfortable conversations. I have put myself at will to do the 1,000 webinars in that 31 days. And it now gives me an opportunity to question people when they don't continue what they say they were going to do during Black History Month and from all the way round to next Black History Month, you know. So I feel there's been a power and a strength around this one. I'm not just been talking to football, I've been talking to other organisations as well, who actually appreciate you a little bit more than football, if you want me to be totally honest. And I see it as an opportunity now that, you know, come the 31st, don't go quiet on us. You know, our educational system, there's one campaign I'd really like to do is influence our educational system, because it's lacking around Black history and only wants to speak about slavery and the negative experience of Black people during that period of time. And Shaun's clapping me and I'm taking that. And can I leave now?
Can't leave yet. Shaun,
you know, this is my sort of sort of Zoom meeting webinar where people are asking me for the same experiences, and the exact same thing what Troy just said. I wholeheartedly endorse. What's going to happen after October the 31st? Yeah, we can sort of, you know, celebrate Black History Month, but this is something which we should have the conversation all the year round. And you asked me about hope. Yeah, there's a phrase which says hope springs eternal. But after a while, we're constantly living in hope. And that, you know, Troy will tell you the same thing. He's tired of living in hope. What he wants to see is a sustainable, positive action and change. Yes, we can always be hopeful that one day we'll sort of get to the land of milk and honey and everything will be how we want it to be. But we've been saying that for years and years and years. And people like Troy, as I say, are energized in relation to the passion which they have and wanted to make the change. They, you know, after a while, are going to become cynical and probably bitter in relation to the fact that, well, we're talking about it, but what is really happening?
And I think
Lorna.
that I agree again, but I think one of the reasons I'm on this call is because I know we at Brentford are going to ensure that we make a change. That's why I'm here. I didn't want to be just a part of this month's celebrations, and working with Monique and our board and our senior management team, because we've got more diverse people. We have got Nitty, who's our lawyer, he's from an Asian background, but he's been somebody I can talk to about issues that I have. No, he's not Black, but yes, he is somebody that's welcomed the conversation and been a part of this conversation. And Monique, you know, being there, being in a senior position, wanting to keep the conversation going. And it's not, for me, I haven't felt it as though it's just started this summer or it's just started this month. It's something that I believe that what Brentford has seen is actually having a Black woman on board has been part of our success. I know I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but I think that's what has been. But I think that's what that's what the club has seen, and that's why I've been there 5 years and I enjoy working there, and I want to be a part of the bigger picture and continue to try and make those changes. I must emphasize, I don't have any this is off the pitch that we're working amongst our team, so it's not on the pitch. I'll leave that to you know, Josh and Christian to talk about, but I'm focusing on off the pitch. We definitely want to make sure that there's changes ahead and I'd also like to think that other clubs might look at Brentford and say, actually, they've got somebody there that's not, is it white, male and pale in this position, and you know, they're doing really well. Let's look at something. You know, it could be, I'm not saying it's because, you know, we're diverse, but there's reasons why you can look at Brentford and say, okay, well, what are they doing that's a little bit different to our club?
Max, I'm conscious we've got questions in the Q&A, and I think there might be some people who want to say something, but there's 2 or 3 things I want to say. Lorna, you're like a breath of fresh air to me, because you always call it out, and that to me makes a huge difference. But you know, I've fallen foul to some of this in my own head recently, because I've felt guilty for being a white person and being a board champion for D&I. You know, I acknowledge I'm white, I've got privilege, I see life through a very, very, very different lens than people who are Black or people of colour. And I realise that, and I think that's really important for me to realise, and that it's not people of colour's job to educate me. It's my job to educate myself about your history and about what's happened to you, so I can have a conversation with you which is equal. And I think that's really important. I don't want to see now every single organisation, they have a token person of the heads of diversity inclusion has to be black or a person of colour, because I think that insults people when you only give that job to them because it's tokenistic. And I also think we've made some big mistakes lumping everything into the BAME category, because when you put everyone into the BAME category, it's like BAME and other. Yeah, within that BAME, you've got probably 50 different nationalities, 50 different backgrounds, 50 different experiences of how to see the world. And we have to change the way we structure our language, our thinking, our way we speak to our colleagues and friends and family, you know, about this, and just challenge those stereotypes and fitting people into boxes. And I think when we do that, we will get some real quantum change. And I think because it will just be, you will be based on merit about what you do, but we'll also understand that diversity brings different thinking, different perspective, different viewpoints, different backgrounds, and it puts a real, I think, a multiple layered approach. And actually it makes you make better decisions, because if you take people from different backgrounds, it makes you make better decisions. So for me, it's like pushing an open door, and I feel privileged to do the job I am, but I know that I'm different. And I know that being different affords me that education, and I need to go and educate myself all the time about what being different means. So I think that allyship is just, I find that mind blowing on a daily basis. Really understanding, going in and find out what makes people feel the way they feel about their life experience. And to me, that's my job. It's not your job. It's my job. So,
Max,
I think. Sure, you can do whatever you like.
No, so I just wanted to bring that trumpet out again, if you don't mind. And where Lorna doesn't want to blow her own trumpet, although she did very well, to be totally honest, you know, it's difficult for a woman in this industry. There's no doubt about it. Okay, it's even more difficult for a black woman in this industry, regardless. I asked Lorna to do an event for me about 4 years ago where she had to stand on stage, and the amount of questions she fired back to me was unbelievable. Troy, I can't do it. She did it, and it was all about the way that she helped an individual. She mentored an individual to be the best person they could be, and that individual has got a fantastic role now at another London football club who we won't name. But I'm telling you now, the influence of someone like Lorna is unbelievable. When I heard she was doing this webinar, because I haven't heard much from her. I can't remember the last time you've been a mentor for me, but I haven't heard, like, she's almost gone into the
Brentford.
background.
Have you not? We've got. Have you not been watching our games?
But she'd gone into the background. But when I heard Lorna was doing this webinar, I just, Monique will tell you, I just gave a round of applause, because it's so important that we hear from someone who has had those experiences, not just at the football club, but working at the EFL, and again, inspires me to do what I do. Now, I don't think she realizes that, but she absolutely inspires me to do what I do, because I know that there's a like-minded person who has had so many other challenges as well, achieving in this industry in a role that many will not recognize, and many, by the way, won't appreciate. And that's Lorna Falconer. So sorry, that's my trumpet moment. Yeah, if you don't mind.
I have got a clarinet through there. Not that I'm privileged, but I haven't got a trumpet. Jonathan has a question, and I think, Monique, you kind of answered it pretty well. But saying Troy and Shaun mentioned viewing Black History Month as sort of generally being lip service, right? Do you have advice for Jonathan? And I'm in this boat as well. White middle class English man, how we can make a real difference. Shaun, I'll go to you if you can help me and Jonathan with that question.
Well, the mere fact that you want to do something about it is a positive start. But the key is that, it shouldn't be just from October the 1st to October the 31st. And as Monique quite eloquently said, it's something which we got to challenge and sort of progress and push 24/7 all the time. And, not everybody's as like-minded as Monique and wanted to actually challenge herself in order to actually make the whole situation as best as she possibly can in terms of having a positive and real understanding. If we had 92 chairmen like Monique and like Lorna, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I think the way in which we can actually make those changes, and as I say, any gradual change is still change. It's how quickly we want that change to be implemented. But we've got to basically get out this mentality that October the 1st, October the 31st, yes, we're going to beat the drum about Black History Month. Yes, we're going to talk about positive change. Yes, we're going to talk about the need for diversity. Let's see where we are from November the 1st, right round to September the 30th.
Do we, I've done shows like this on talkSPORT, and the message board can be quite a frightening place. You know, half of it's incredibly positive, but it might be as much as half that isn't. And if you're talking about Black History Month, they'll say, why isn't there a White History Month? If you're talking about Black Lives Matter, they'll say all lives matter. Do we give up on those people, Troy?
Why would you ask me that question? No, we don't give up. We don't give up on those people. We, you know, every time I remember being on your show, Max, and it's a massive plug all the time for talkSPORT. I think you've done this very well. And the producer refused to let us take questions, refused to let us see what was coming in on the Twitter feed. And what that said to me, that obviously that everyone was going absolute crazy because we were talking about racism again. And I was, you know, we were having a topic of conversation that makes far too many people, by the way, uncomfortable. I heard earlier, I don't know if it was Monique, said that it's a minority. But I always feel that minority has the loudest voice because we don't champion ourselves well enough, more maybe because it just becomes natural to us. But we can't give up on anybody. If we gave up on people, then that divide will continue to exist. If we change the mentality of one person in everything that we do, that's one more than what we started with. So, you know, you say give up, I guarantee they still tune in, Max. They don't go, right, I've had enough of talkSPORT and that's it. They still tune in.
You know what's interesting, I think partly it was we could see the text board, he wouldn't let us take calls to air. And partly I think was a fear. And I find this with a lot of people, and I think because there haven't been enough conversations like this, and I don't know what you think about this, Marcus, there is a fear when you talk about race and you talk about it that a lot of people who, you know, aren't racist, we all have unconscious bias, but just don't know what to say. They don't know, they're nervous about saying anything, so they don't say anything at all. And I found that a lot when I start talking about any serious issue, be it racism or homophobia or sexism or whatever in the industry, I feel so many people are just too scared about saying the wrong thing, so they say nothing. Does that make sense, Marcus?
It makes sense, but I think that's kind of avoiding the topic. If I could bring up, you know, when we talk about the England national side, Gareth Southgate never ducks that question. But again, the national captain, there's a message out that you cannot ask him about Black Lives Matter or anything to do with race, which I find a bit appalling in terms of he plays with players that have been abused. And for me, it's about the solidarity, the support mechanism. So as Monique said, it's about educating ourselves. You know, it's about taking that responsibility to be able to converse on that topic, because silence is a compliance to it as well, in my book. You do need to touch on those subjects, because the microphone's going to be pushed in front of you at some stage. You can't just keep saying, I'm not talking about it, and blank journalist or whatever. There has to be a personal responsibility, especially if you're a national captain or a club captain. That's part of leadership. You can't be, you know, ducking any sort of question, but we've got to be in the right sort of position to answer it. I understand. But if you don't, what do you do? As Troy, my good friend, says, Google is free.
How do you help people who how do you help people who want to talk about these things but don't feel comfortable doing it, Troy?
How do they help themselves? You know, when you say don't feel comfortable, I look at, Marcus brought up Harry Kane, I'll bring up Ben Mee, captain of Burnley, just been battered 5-0 at the Etihad. A plane's flown over the Etihad just as they're taking the knee that says "White Lives Matter, Burnley." The commentator after the game also has a responsibility, by the way, says to Ben Mee, you know, you've just conceded 5 goals, you know, that was terrible, wasn't it? And asked him to explain the 5 goals. Ben Mee, you know, said, there's something more important I want to talk about. I want to talk about the plane that has flown over the Etihad. I want to talk about the very fact that you know, we have taken the knee and the reason we've taken the knee. And he was a little bit nervous in what he was saying, but that's not a problem. You know, I don't expect you to feel what I feel, you know, and I don't expect you to say it in the manner and the language and with the experience that I have. But if all I ask is that you appreciate it and have that conversation. And I'll, you know, any of us will put you right. We won't go, oh, listen, here she goes, here he goes again. What we'll do is, you know, if you're confident with that person will say, you know, we don't use that language anymore. I've been called coloured. We don't use that language anymore. I don't like BAME because that doesn't talk about my experience. It talks about a cluster of people who have different experiences. So if you're going to say that, talk about my experience, my Black experience. You know, I'm having to feel uncomfortable every single day working in this industry, bar none. The fact that I can now feel uncomfortable in my house is fine. I'm all right with that. But I have to feel uncomfortable. So anyone that is uncomfortable around this topic, listen, learn, be open, ask that uncomfortable question that you feel uncomfortable about, that actually I might feel, I'm so glad you've asked that. I'm so glad that you want to understand and know more about what I and my people have been through, that you're prepared to be open and listen. That's Max, that's all we can. It's not, you know, this thing is not rocket science, by the way. It's not like, you know, we're putting together a jigsaw puzzle and we can't find the last piece. Be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, but want to learn as well.
Lorna?
No, I was just saying that Christian mentioned earlier that we had a conversation this morning just on that subject. And one of the things I said to Christian, knowing him like I do, was there's nothing he can say that is going to offend. He will only ask the question, or, you know, maybe say something that somebody else may say differently, but he's never going to intentionally say anything to offend anyone. But again, it's having the uncomfortable conversation and being able to say, you know, it is. So one of the things we said today, Christian's one of those. He's got friends from all different nationalities, from all different backgrounds. But I mentioned it's okay. We're all black. We're Black people. He wouldn't necessarily just describe people as Black people. You know, it just be, you know, people he knows. Josh is the midfielder. That's how he talks. That's his mentality, and it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's just having the open conversation and being comfortable with it. And I think by having that, being able to have that conversation with Christian is just a benefit.
Sure. Tell us about Take a Stand, Troy. And then after that, Monique, we want to sort of finish off by discussing 3 things that Brentford will hope to achieve by this time next year, some sort of pledges for the football club. But Troy, start with Take a Stand.
Yeah, Kick It Out launched an initiative a couple of weeks ago during the international break called Take a Stand, as you say. You know, we've obviously been on this journey for 27 years. People say we've done a great job. People say we've done a crap job. Discrimination still exists in football. So ultimately, we haven't achieved what we put out on the tin. But what we're trying to do is basically, as a collective initiative, let people take ownership. So take ownership, make pledges. How would you like to take a stand? You know, what would you want to see changed in the game? How can you contribute to that change? So it's almost like a personal pledge. It could be a club pledge. It could be a community pledge, a foundation pledge, a grassroots pledge, an individual pledge. It's just giving people ownership to come on this journey with us. We're a small charity. We're dwindling in numbers as a charity. We're never going to be able to eliminate discrimination in society, let alone football. But if we all come on the journey and we all go back into society and influence in that way, influence in our pockets, in our little areas, be able to call situations out, be able to comfort people when they need, be able to have the uncomfortable conversations. That is all part of what the initiative is, and how we're trying to collectively bring football together to support us as such, and but also to eliminate discrimination in all areas. So it's an opportunity. I've seen many questions come in about what more can we do. That is absolutely a start point of what people can do, is join us in taking a stand.
Monique, time for some pledges.
Okay, so we've put one of our pledges into action already, which is we've completely revamped our recruitment process internally within our organisation. We pledged to advertise our vacancies much more widely, to look at the way we completely do our recruitment, inside and out and back to front and side to side, to make sure we're going into the widest levels of talent pools we can and the most diverse talent pools we can to attract people to come to our club. We are going to do a company-wide education, which we would hope would include a Kick It Out Equality Inspires education session with our players. We are making sure that diversity is reflected in all of our marketing campaigns. So images that we promote, images that are shown so that people see, and they, you've got to, see it to be it. I think that's something Lorna said really early on. We haven't done that as much previously, and that's something we're going to do. And we're going to measure the makeup of our fan base, and in our attempt to bring in, and our big strategy to bring in fans, we want to mirror the local community more, and we're going to do what we can to bring in people from all backgrounds, but give them an experience which is right for them, relevant to their background. And we're going to look at that. It's going to take some time with COVID, but that is firmly on our agenda. And we have just recruited a new head of diversity and inclusion that's going to help us achieve that, and put in some far-reaching plans in order to do that. So that's just a selection of a number of pledges that we're going to have that will help us. And as well as all of that, we won't tolerate any racism and discrimination, and we put far-ranging social media policy out there. And in line with our Be Together campaign, we're going to make sure that we keep our Together Now focus going, so that everyone feels welcome all the way through the club.
And presumably Christian, Lorna, Josh and Marcus would say Brentford is a nice place to work. Would you would agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Very open club. Even in my position as club ambassador, after I've had a playing career with the club over many decades, given that opportunity to be the club ambassador is one that fills me with great pride and responsibility as well. And with that being said, hopefully one day someone can say they can see it in me, they can believe there's a position higher up, so they can achieve that as well. So myself being visible can help in that sort of shape for the younger generations. Even if Josh wanted to become a coach afterwards, then he can see the pathways that it's there. There's a possibility. He doesn't have to hesitate. He can think, you know what, 5 years before I do retire, I know what I'm going to do. I was not in that position when it was my time. I had to kind of step away, come back into the game, and then find myself. So the club is in a good position, gives people opportunities.
Troy, you've seen a couple of questions on the Q&A that you wanted to address.
I mean, not personally addressed, but there's a couple of good ones in there. But thanks for that, Max. There's a question from a question from a guy called Josh here, probably from Monique or Lorna, about, in a similar way to things mentioned, as someone who is young and running a Brentford fan group on social media, what are the 3 best things I could constantly be doing to make a difference and use a platform to spread diversity, equality, and the message of education, celebrating and change? That's a great question. Monique or Lorna, I would say.
Monique, go for it.
Thanks, Lorna. Thank you, lovely. I think the same as I said. I think social media is really interesting, because that's where you'll get your buffoons, and I call them buffoons because they're the ones that will make really nonsensical statements. But actually, if you do have a social media group, is to celebrate the players. I think use the players because they're exemplars of everything we've got. To talk about what they're doing, to talk about their voice, because I think Players are brilliant for social mobility, so I think that's a really great way. Use stories of the players more. Talk about what we're doing within the club and how we're mirroring our community outside the club. So talk to us inside the club and say what you're doing and put that out on social media as well. I think it's really easy to sit in a vacuum, but I think social media is really powerful for good. And we don't celebrate good news stories enough. We're very quick to put out bad news stories, but we never put out good news stories. I think you and I talked about this in our biggest game yet, Troy. We said, I'd love to have, you know, an event which celebrates all the good things we've done, to celebrate all the amazing people that we work with from all the different backgrounds. So I think social media is a really powerful force for good if you find the right information and you push out the right stories. And I think clubs and trusts work well together. We do with our trust. We work brilliantly with them because they work brilliantly and tirelessly in the community, often sung but very often unsung, about some of those good things. So if you've got a social media group, take that stuff and plug it far and wide, because you know that shows people the force that football has for good.
You've got a taste for this, Troy. Question from Troy for Shaun.
Well, it's not actually from me, but I've got a taste for it. I don't know why they didn't start with me and leave you behind, to be honest, but never mind. Shaun, as the person on the panel who is probably the least directly involved with the industry, as a fan like the majority of us, how important do you see the football world's action on BLM in the effect it can have on wider society in the UK?
Football's the world's #1 sport. As I say, it is a great influencer by virtue of its popularity. And the people who take part in it, especially the footballers, you know, can have that platform to, you know, make a positive statement and hopefully a positive change for the good of the game. How far that reaches into the boardrooms, reaches into the organisations like the FA, only time will tell. But we are seeing, you know, the power, that real power that a footballer really does have, especially in relation to Marcus Rashford and his campaign so far as free school meals for children. He is making the government quake. So it's quite clear that, you know, footballers like Josh, like Christian, are powerful role models and powerful goal models who can, as I say, use their influence, use their power to basically say, listen, it's a new era now. It's not like 50 years ago. We've moved on and we're going to use our power for the force of good.
And in duty's back.
I guess to finish, yeah, thank you very much, Troy. Thanks for that last 5 minutes, the best 5 minutes of the show. You were really excellent. I guess, Troy, you know, people watching who don't necessarily, you know, run a big company or just individuals, anyone can make their own pledges, right? And their pledges might be just to learn more, to read more, to understand more, to perhaps talk to family members who are less enlightened. You know, anyone can make pledges. And I guess anybody watching can do that. And then if everybody does that and tells everybody else and everybody else and everyone else, it could make a massive difference.
Yeah, listen, there's an opportunity here for this to go far and wide, if you want me to be totally honest. I mean, myself and Marcus deliver education into the academy environment, and it's been great because some of the parents, because obviously the children are at home and it's on webinars now, some of the parents have been listening to the webinars and, you know, understanding what their sons are learning as part of their footballing journey. And, you know, a couple of parents have messaged me and absolutely said, you know, you initiated a conversation within our house that we would never have had. And that's the power. And if their pledge then is to listen and understand their children and what they go through and the experiences that they have and the experiences of the game, then that's got to be a start of where we have this tide of change, you know, because we can't just ask the players to do more, you know, and Josh and Christian have both spoken so well tonight. It's they can do as much as what they do, but we can all support and help that journey as well. And I think that's what we're finding. That's a positivity that I'd like to take out of it. There's a lot more people learning on the go. And I don't think football's very good at talking that up. And that's why that minority's voice always seems to be louder than the voice of the majority.
Listen, thanks everybody for coming on and doing this. Thanks everybody for watching. Josh, Luton away. I've never been colder than Kenilworth Road, I'll be honest. Is that an easy point for you lads?
Nah, we lost there last year, to be honest. 7:45 kickoff that we're going to go season. So yeah, it's never easy game. They're doing quite well at the moment. So yeah, we're going to have to put them in performance.
Christian, are you more optimistic about the game?
It needs to be 3 points, that's for sure. I'm doing my rehab right now, so unfortunately I can't help the boys. But every game in this league is difficult. Josh is absolutely right about that. But I'm 100% sure we'll get 3 points on Saturday.
And Marcus, I've got a game on Saturday against Old Thorntonians. I can give you probably half an hour. Black shorts, Red Sox, 12 quid.
12 quid. I'll go Kenilworth Road. I'm commentating on the game anyway. But one day,
look, thanks. Yeah, good man. Thanks so much. Well, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I like having these conversations. I think what Brentford is, as an outsider, you know, I think it's great that Brentford are doing this, and I very much hope that every football club does it and takes the lead. And you know, there does have to be a most diverse, most inclusive football club, and you know, hopefully it is Brentford, and hopefully every other one of the clubs matches up and catches up with you. So look, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching all of it. And I think we just leave the Zoom like you'd leave a Zoom with your family. Yeah, round of applause, everybody. And thanks.